He signed the divorce papers with a smirk, his thumbs already flying across his phone screen to text his mistress about their merger celebration. Across the cold glass table of the conference room, the restrictive non-disclosure agreement slid toward me. Jeremy thought he was discarding a liability, a plain, unambitious wife who did not fit his shiny future as CEO. He was so focused on his victory lap that he did not notice the thick, cream-colored envelope resting under my hand, sealed with red wax. I did not cry. I did not beg. I just sat in absolute silence waiting for the pen to stop moving. He thought he was ending a marriage. He had no idea he was signing his own professional death warrant. Before we see what is inside that envelope, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from and what time is it there? I love seeing how global our community is. For 5 years, Jeremy introduced me to his colleagues as a freelance archivist. He always said it with a polite, dismissive little wave, the way one might describe a child's finger painting or a quaint knitting hobby. To him, my job was just organizing dusty files and digitizing old menus for the Vanguard Hospitality Historical Database. He thought it was busy work, a favor he had pulled strings to get for his shy, unambitious wife so she would feel useful. He never understood that in the world of ultra-luxury hotels, the most powerful person in the room is never the one popping the champagne cork or hosting the gala. It is the one who notices the dust on the chandelier. I learned this from my mother, who built this empire, not by being loud, but by being observant. She taught me that true power is architectural. It is silent. It is the invisible framework that holds the ceiling up. And for the last 5 years, I was not just archiving PDFs. I was auditing the structural integrity of Jeremy's entire career. While he was out buying drinks for potential investors and charming the board with his winning smile, I was awake at 3 a.m, cross-referencing service logs with vendor invoices. I was the one who noticed when the floral budget for the flagship location inflated by 200% in a single quarter. I was the one who flagged the safety compliance failures in the elevator maintenance records before they became lawsuits. Jeremy simply did not see it. He did not see any of it. He would come home late, smelling of expensive scotch and unearned confidence, tossing his laptop onto the kitchen island. He would brag about a brilliant strategic report he had submitted to the board, completely unaware that I had opened his computer while he slept, deleted his chaotic, jargon-filled nonsense, and rewritten the entire proposal from scratch. He thought he was a genius because his ideas were always approved. He never once questioned why his drafts, which were riddled with errors and logical gaps, miraculously turned into polished, data-driven masterclasses by the time they reached the CEO's desk. He mistook my silence for emptiness. He looked at my quiet life, my lack of social media, my preference for nights, and my obsession with details, and he saw a woman who was small. He saw a wife who was content to live in his shadow. But he was wrong. I was not living in his shadow. I was the one casting it. I was the architect of his reputation, the editor of his success, and the silent custodian of the empire he thought he was conquering. He believed he was the rising star of Vanguard Hospitality. He had no idea that the only reason he was rising was that I was quietly removing the weights from his ankles every single day. And now, sitting across from him in this glass cage, watching him check his watch, I realized the tragedy of it. He thought he was cutting loose dead weight. He did not realize he was severing his own lifeline. "You need to sign this, Sydney," Jeremy said, tapping the non-disclosure agreement with his manicured fingernail. "The board votes on the CEO position next month. I cannot have a messy divorce dragging down my stock value." He leaned back in his leather chair, inspecting me like a piece of furniture that had gone out of style. "Look, let us be honest. You do not fit the part anymore. Vanguard needs a face. It needs energy. It needs a power couple." He did not say Jasmine's name, but he did not have to. Jasmine, the public relations director with the perfect hair and the loud laugh, was already waiting in the wings. She was the brand update he thought he needed. I was just the legacy software he was trying to uninstall. "You are quiet," he continued, making the word sound like a disease. "You are invisible. And frankly, this settlement is generous considering what you brought to the table," which was nothing. I looked at the number on the paper. It was a pittance. A severance package for a temporary worker, not a wife of 5 years. But as I stared at his smug face, I realized something terrifying. For a long time I had believed him. This was the trap of the golden cage. It was not built of iron bars. It was built of comfort and conditioning. I had stayed because the cage was warm. I had stayed because every time he belittled me, he followed it with a crumb of affection, just enough to keep me starving for more. I had convinced myself that his criticism was coaching, that his neglect was just the price of being with a great man. I had normalized the cruelty until I could not tell where his ego ended and my reality began. It is a sunk cost fallacy that destroys women like me. We invest so much of ourselves, our patience, our youth, our silence, that walking away feels like bankruptcy. So we stay hoping the investment will finally pay off, hoping he will finally see us. He only sees the reflection of his own importance in our eyes. But 72 hours ago my mother died, and when I held her cold hand the spell broke. I saw the cage for what it was. It was not a home. It was a holding cell. Jeremy was not a great man. He was a small, insecure boy playing dress-up in a suit I had paid for. He thought he was offering me a way out with this settlement. He thought I should be grateful for the scraps. He had no idea that the woman who accepted crumbs was gone. She died with her mother. The woman sitting in this chair now was not hungry for his approval. She was hungry for receipts. "Are you going to sign, or are you waiting for a pen that matches your purse?" Jeremy sneered, checking his reflection in the dark glass of the window. I picked up the NDA. For a second he looked relieved, thinking he had won again. Then I slid it back across the table unsigned. "I am not signing that, Jeremy," I said, my voice steady. "And I am not leaving." He laughed, a sharp, dismissive bark. "You do not have a choice. This is happening. Do not make me call security to escort you out. That would be humiliating for you." "Actually," I said, reaching for the cream-colored envelope, "I think we need to update the record first." I slid the envelope toward Judge Karen, the mediator who had been watching us with the bored expression of someone who charged by the hour. "Before we finalize the division of assets, this document must be entered." Jeremy rolled his eyes. "What is it, a receipt for your cat food, a parking ticket?" Judge Karen broke the red wax seal with a loud crack. She pulled out the heavy bond paper inside. She adjusted her glasses, her boredom instantly vanishing. Her eyes widened as she scanned the header. She looked up at me, then back at the paper, her hand trembling slightly. "Mr. Caldwell," Judge Karen said, her voice dropping an octave, "you need to sit down." "I am standing," Jeremy said, buttoning his jacket. "I have a merger celebration to attend." "Sit down," the judge commanded, slamming her hand on the table. Jeremy froze. "This is not a parking ticket," she continued, her eyes fixed on him with a look of terrifying respect. "This is a notice of ownership transfer." She turned the document so he could see the embossed seal. "Effective 72 hours ago, upon the passing of her mother, Sydney has inherited the controlling interest in the Vanguard Hospitality Group. The total asset valuation is $180 billion. Jeremy blinked. He let out a nervous chuckle. "That is a joke. Her mother was a nobody. She lived in a cottage. Her mother was the founder," Judge Karen read from the file, "and Sydney is now the sole owner. Mr. Caldwell, your wife does not just own this building. She owns the chair you are sitting in. She owns the brand you work for." The smirk slid off Jeremy's face like oil. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in 5 years. And in his eyes I saw the dawn of a magnificent, paralyzing fear. "Wait," Jeremy stammered, his face pale. "If she owns the company, that is a conflict of interest. She cannot be on the board. She does not know anything about the business." Judge Karen ignored him. She flipped to the second page of the document. "There is an addendum here regarding corporate governance," she said. "For the past 5 years, a proxy has been attending board meetings and conducting internal audits under the alias The Ghost Guest." Jeremy stopped breathing. The blood drained from his face. The Ghost Guest was a legend at Vanguard. It was the name given to the anonymous internal auditor whose reports were legendary for their brutality and precision. The Ghost Guest was the one who had blocked Jeremy's reckless expansion into Miami. The Ghost Guest was the one who had slashed his travel budget. Jeremy had spent years complaining about this person. He had called them a bureaucratic nightmare, a joyless bean counter, and a faceless coward. "You," he whispered, staring at me. "You are the ghost." "I am," I said quietly. "Every performance review you hated. Every budget request denied. Every time you were told your numbers did not add up. That was me." "But," Howie asked, his voice trembling, "I lived with you. You were always there. You were just organizing files." "That is exactly why you never caught me," I said. "Because you are a narcissist, Jeremy. And narcissists only see what shines. You looked at my quiet life, my lack of ambition, my simple clothes, and you saw emptiness. You assumed that because I was not screaming for attention, I had nothing to say. You mistook my silence for vacancy." I leaned forward. "But silence is not empty. It is observant. While you were busy admiring your reflection in the glass, I was looking through it. I was watching you pad your expense reports. I was watching you falsify vendor contracts. I was the judge at your trial for 5 years, and you were too busy preening to notice the gavel in my hand. Jeremy sank back into his chair. He looked small. The arrogance that had defined him for years was gone, replaced by the terrified realization of a man who has been walking on a trapdoor his entire life only to find the lever has just been pulled. So, what now? Jeremy asked, his voice barely a whisper. Do you fire me? Is that the plan? I stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. I walked to the head of the table where he was sitting. No, Jeremy, I am not firing you. Firing you implies you were doing a job. I placed a folder on the table. This is a forensic audit of the renovation budget for the West Side location. Do you recognize these numbers? He stared at the folder. He did not open it. He knew what was inside. $4.8 million, I said. That is the amount you funneled into shell companies for consulting fees. Consulting companies that coincidentally share an address with your brother's law firm. Jeremy closed his eyes. Violet. Sydney, please, I can explain. It was just a loan. I was going to pay it back. It is not a loan. It is embezzlement, I said. Just then his phone buzzed on the table. A text from Jasmine. I heard about the audit. Do not contact me. I am cooperating with the board. Jeremy stared at the screen. The woman he was leaving me for, the woman who was supposed to be his partner in this new life, had abandoned ship the moment she saw the water rising. She knew, he rasped. She helped me set up the accounts, and now she is helping me close them, I replied. She wants to keep her job. You are expendable? Jeremy stood up, his face flushing red. Panic was setting in. Fine. You want me out, I am out. But you owe me my severance. My contract states that if I am terminated without cause, I get a golden parachute. $6 million. He looked at me with a desperate, ugly hope. Write the check and I will disappear. I opened the second folder. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. Do you remember this memo? From 3 years ago, Jeremy frowned. What is that? It is the integrity clause, I read. A policy you personally enforced to fire the sales director in 2021. It states that any executive found to have falsified financial records forfeits all severance stock options and benefits. I slid the paper toward him. You signed it, Jeremy. You insisted on it. You built the trap that just caught you. The silence in the room was absolute. Jeremy stared at his own signature. The $6 million he was counting on to start his new life with Jasmine gone. He had legislated himself into poverty. He looked up at me, and for the first time the arrogance shattered completely. Sydney, he stammered. Please, I have nothing. You have exactly what you earned, I said. I pressed the intercom button. Security. Please escort Mr. Caldwell from the building. 2 guards entered. One of them was the man Jeremy had ignored in the lobby every morning for 5 years. He looked at Jeremy, then at me, and gave a sharp, respectful nod. This way, sir, the guard said. Jeremy did not fight. He did not yell. He simply deflated. He walked out of the room, a man who had forgotten that gravity applies to everyone, finally hitting the ground. The door clicked shut, cutting off the sight of Jeremy's slumped shoulders. The room went silent. It was not the heavy, suffocating silence I had lived in for years. It was clean. It was empty. It was the silence of a room that had finally been swept of its debris. The department heads sat around the table looking at me. There was no confusion in their eyes anymore. No dismissal. They were waiting for instructions. We have a lot of work to do, I said, gathering my files. We will reconvene at 9 tomorrow morning to discuss the restructuring. Thank you, everyone. They filed out quietly, one by one, offering nods of respect. When the last one left, I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the trees. The city lights were beginning to flicker on a vast grid of electricity and ambition. I looked at the reflection in the glass. For 7 years, I had avoided mirrors. I had not wanted to see the woman who made herself small to fit inside a man's ego. I had not wanted to see the archivist who hid in the basement while her husband took credit for the skyline. But the woman staring back at me now was not small. She was not hiding. She was standing in the light just as my mother had told me to. I held the wax-sealed envelope in my hand one last time. For days I had thought of it as a weapon. I thought it was a sword my mother had left me to cut Jeremy down. But as I stood there, feeling the hum of the building beneath my feet, I realized it was not a weapon, it was a mirror. She had not given me the power to destroy him, she had given me the power to define myself. Revenge is a fire that burns the house down to kill the rats. But justice is a cool, clean rain. It washes away the dirt and leaves the foundation standing. I had not stooped to Jeremy's level. I had not screamed or lied or cheated. I had simply applied the rules he claimed to uphold and let the weight of his own actions pull him under. I had cleaned the house. I placed the envelope in my bag. The weight was gone. The anger was gone. There was only the view. I was 32 years old. I was the chairwoman of a $180 billion empire. And for the first time in my life, I was completely beautifully free. I turned off the lights in the conference room. I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking against the marble floor, echoing not as an apology but as an arrival. If Sydney's story reminded you of your own strength, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience. Stay strong.